The next morning, Kenny and Pines were already back in space. The trip had been arranged quickly. Too quickly for anyone to argue with it. The questions surrounding Lord Rain had only multiplied since finding the palace. The ship, the recordings, the skeleton, the insanity. None of it explained why he had entered Eclipse, and Celine's observation from the previous night kept replaying in Kenny's mind. They'd searched the wrong thing, not the people. The people knew what happened, or at least pieces of it. The stealth vessel slipped from Reach Prime's atmosphere and entered jump space. Pines sat across from Kenny with his boots on the dashboard, a habit everyone hated, a habit he refused to stop. Pines looked out the viewport. I really hope we find some giant hidden conspiracy. Kenny sighed. Why? Because if we don't. Pines shrugged. Then we went all the way back to this depressing planet just to ask villagers questions. That's literally what we're doing. Yeah, but it sounds cooler if there's a conspiracy. Hours later, the dead world appeared once again. The old Rain homeworld looked just as miserable as before. Scattered lights, tiny villages, dead infrastructure, a planet that felt like civilization had been ripped apart and then forgotten. The ship landed several kilometers from one of the larger settlements. The pair decided to travel on foot. It made them appear less threatening, or at least that was the theory. The reality became obvious immediately. The people were terrified. Not nervous, not cautious, terrified. The moment villagers noticed strangers approaching, doors closed, children vanished inside buildings. People stopped talking, windows slammed shut. One old man literally dropped his basket and ran. Pines watched him disappear. Friendly bunch. Kenny frowned. They're scared. No kidding. The deeper they moved into the settlement, the worse it became. Nobody wanted to speak. Nobody wanted eye contact. Nobody wanted anything to do with them. The village itself looked rough. Really rough. Homes built from salvaged materials. Pieces of old military equipment turned into walls. Ship plating used as roofing. The entire place looked like survival held together by stubbornness. Eventually they reached the village center, a small open area surrounding a water pump. There they found the first person not running away, a little girl, maybe 8 years old. She stood beside the pump, desperately working the handle. Again. Nothing came out. The child looked exhausted, yet she kept trying. Pines stopped walking. The girl pumped harder. A weak stream finally emerged. Then a disgusting black sludge poured out. The smell reached them instantly. The little girl's face fell. She looked close to tears. Pines was already moving. Kenny smirked. Of course he was. The girl backed away nervously as Pines crouched beside the machine. The former Eclipse survivor examined it for about 3 seconds, then immediately started dismantling his watch. Kenny laughed. What are you doing? Fixing it. With your watch? Probably. The little girl stared. Several villagers watched from nearby buildings. Pines unscrewed components, pulled apart tiny gears, modified a damaged filter housing, connected several pieces together, then shoved everything back inside. The entire process took less than 2 minutes. Kenny wasn't entirely sure it should have worked. Pines stood, wiped his hands, then pulled the pump handle. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Pines frowned, then hit the machine. Hard. Water exploded from the pump. Clear water, clean water, fresh water. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted. Villagers sprinted from every direction. Buckets, containers, cups, anything they could find. Nobody cared about Kenny. Nobody cared about Pines. Nobody cared who fixed it. People threw themselves toward the water, drinking, filling containers, crying, laughing. The desperation was heartbreaking. Kenny watched a woman collapse to her knees while drinking. A man filled 3 containers simultaneously. Several children were literally splashing their faces. The pair exchanged a look. Neither liked what they were seeing. These people were thirsty, not inconvenienced, not struggling. Thirsty, the kind of thirsty that kills people. Eventually the crowd settled. The water continued flowing. For the first time since arriving, nobody seemed afraid, mostly because they were distracted. Then the little girl approached, quietly, shyly. She walked directly toward Pines, holding something. The former Eclipse survivor crouched. The child gently placed a small object in his hand. A flower, made from scrap metal, tiny pieces of wire, old bolts, bits of machinery, simple, beautiful. Pines blinked. The little girl immediately turned and ran. Wait, Pines stood. Oi! The child kept running. I didn't even say thank you. Two adults standing nearby smiled sadly. The woman shook her head. She won't answer. Pines stopped. What? The man beside her nodded. She's mute. Pines looked toward the little girl, now disappearing between buildings.
His expression softened. Then he carefully tucked the metal flower into his pocket. The conversation started naturally after that. People approached, slowly, cautiously. Questions were exchanged. Names, where they came from, what they wanted. Nobody recognized Kenny, which wasn't entirely surprising. 7 years of isolation changed things. Many of these people hadn't seen a broadcast in years. Many probably hadn't seen Kenny since he was a teenager. Eventually, Kenny carefully steered the conversation toward Lord Rain. The atmosphere changed immediately. The smiles vanished. People became nervous. One woman crossed herself. Another man looked toward the ground. Nobody wanted to discuss it. Yet pieces emerged. Tiny fragments, riddles, half-answers, stories, rumors. One old woman claimed Lord Rain used to walk through villages at night collecting volunteers. Nobody knew what happened afterward. A farmer described lights appearing in abandoned facilities. Another villager mentioned hearing screams from mountains several years ago. Every answer raised more questions. Pines frowned. What was he doing? Nobody answered directly. Eventually, one man spoke, carefully, like he was afraid someone might hear. The Lord wanted stronger people. Silence. Another villager immediately looked terrified. The man regretted speaking, yet continued anyway. He tested things, on himself, on others. The room went quiet. Kenny's stomach tightened. The compound, the immortality serum, the experiments. Suddenly those theories felt much more real. Then something changed. A woman studying Kenny suddenly froze. Her eyes widened. You. Kenny looked toward her. The woman stood, terrified. No. Another step backward. No, no, no. The panic spread instantly. Others looked closer. Recognition followed. The realization moved through the village like wildfire. Kenny Reach, Lord Rain's son. People began backing away. Not because they knew about the war. Not because they hated him. Because they were afraid. Pure instinctive fear. PTSD. The reaction felt almost identical to how people reacted to Lord Rain. That disturbed Kenny more than he expected. He immediately raised both hands. We're not here to hurt anyone. Nobody seemed convinced. The conversation died after that. No matter what Kenny asked, no matter what Pines asked, the villagers retreated, doors closed, windows shut, the trust vanished. Yet they had learned enough to know something terrible happened, enough to know experiments took place, enough to know Lord Rain's shadow still haunted this world. As they prepared to leave, Kenny made a promise. He stood in the center of the village, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. We'll send help. No response. We'll send water systems. Still nothing. Repair teams. Another pause. Farmers. Doctors. The doors remained closed, yet Kenny knew they were listening. The pair headed back toward the ship, almost there. Then someone grabbed Pines' hand. Both men froze. The little girl, the mute child. She stood beside him, looking nervous, terrified. Pines crouched. The girl leaned close, then whispered, a whisper so soft Kenny almost missed it. Save us from the monsters. Then she ran, gone, vanishing between buildings before either man could react. Pines remained frozen. Kenny stared after her. Neither spoke, because one thing was obvious. Mute people don't whisper. The trip back to Reach felt much longer. The metal flower sat in Pines' lap. The little girl's words replayed endlessly. Save us from the monsters. Kenny stared out the viewport. What do you think she meant? Pines shook his head. I don't know. Another pause. But I don't think she meant Lord Rain. That thought lingered. Neither liked it. By the time they returned to Reach Prime, the entire group waited for them. Celine, Lyra, Darius, everyone. The moment they entered the room, questions started flying. Kenny held up a hand, then gave the summary. The water, the villagers, the fear, the experiments, the panic after learning who he was, the little girl's warning. The room became increasingly quiet. Eventually, Kenny finished. We still don't know his plan. Nobody argued, because it was true. They had answers, just not the answer. Celine immediately stood. We need to bring them here. Everyone looked toward her. The queen folded her arms. They're dying. They need help. Kenny nodded. He was already about to agree. Then Darius spoke. Don't.
The room turned. The old warrior sat thoughtfully. Help them, absolutely, but don't move them. Celine frowned. Why? Darius sighed. They've spent 7 years surviving collapse. Another pause. 7 years living without laws, without structure, without trust. He looked around the room. You bring them all here. Another pause. And you're dropping traumatized survivors into the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. The room became thoughtful. Darius continued. And for all we know, half of them blame Kenny, the other half blame Reach, and the rest blame everybody. Nobody argued, because it made sense. The old warrior pointed toward the star map. Help them there, pausing briefly.
Teach them there, rebuild there, earn trust first. Celine slowly nodded. Kenny smiled. So basically do what Reach did. Darius nodded. Exactly. The decision came quickly after that. Engineers, farmers, doctors, repair crews, water specialists, entire aid groups would be sent. Not soldiers, helpers. The first true act of rebuilding between Reach and the forgotten people Lord Rain had left behind. And somewhere in the back of Pine's mind, the little girl's whisper still lingered. Save us from the monsters. The problem was, nobody yet knew what monsters she meant.